All right, and welcome into the In Between Fantasy Football Podcast, your place for a refreshing and feel-good take on fantasy football and NFL gambling. The boys of summer, they're back in campuses across the country getting ready for the season. So we're here to wade through the headlines to tell fantasy managers what to bear in mind and what's absolute bullshit. I'm your host, Seth Wilcock, back with the Canadian kid Craze. And Craze, before we dive in, have you had the opportunity in your lifetime yet? I know it's a short lifetime, to cross the border down south here and go post up at an NFL training camp?
I have not gone for a training camp. Well, for me to go down and make the trip, I'm going down for games. Haven't really had the opportunity to go down just for a training camp. Would love to get that opportunity in the future. Get to see some of the players, get to kind of get the behind the scenes access. For now, we'll just be relying on those beat writers coming out of all these cities.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. And, I had the opportunity as a kid. My grandparents took me my first Steelers training camp in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, St. Vincent College. And man, it's always been a special place where me and the boys started going a couple years in a row there. I started taking my younger brother, and it's just one of those things that it kind of just gets you in that mindset. Do you learn a whole lot? I'm not sure, because I can remember at the same time, like leaving my first or one of my last training camps that I went to, and I was like, Vance McDonald, tight end one, baby, and fired him up. And I think he had maybe 300 yards that year. So you can learn a lot from this, but at the same time, there's a lot of stories that are coming out of these camps of, hey, this guy's in the best shape of his life. We've heard it from players themselves. We've heard it from reporters. We hear a lot of different usages that never come to tact as well, but we're going to break that all down for you folks today. And a quick reminder that the easiest way to support us here on the program is go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. And if you enjoy this type of content, consider subscribing to the new home of the IBT podcast. That's FSAN's Fantasy Football Advice channel. In addition to the IBT podcast on the channel, you can find the Fantasy Forecast. That's our redraft show, the Dynasty Pulse, all things Dynasty. Too Much Best Ball, you can figure that one out, and From the Form, our live interactive Q&A show. So we'd appreciate you giving all those shows a watch and supporting the entire channel. And Craze, what do you say we fire up a little bear in mind or BS?
Yes, sir. Let's get into it.
This just in, breaking news. Man, that sounds like a bunch of bullshit to me.
All right, it's bear in mind or bullshit. We're talking about the biggest training camp headlines as we sit here in the first week of August. And Craze, maybe no bigger one than that Malik Nabers is really exceeding expectations right now for the New York Giants and their fans. We have a tweet here from Jeff Mueller, PT DPT, saying, I generally don't need to see more clips of Malik Nabers to move him up to wide receiver 7 or 8 for 2026. Sharp cutting and push off of that right leg. Very comfortable decelerating, sticking right foot into the ground and reaccelerating. Smooth and fast in the quick burst, plus COD. Wow, you can kind of check out the video here on the YouTube as well right now. Looking pretty good out there, Malik Nabers, is he's cutting at a good point. We're seeing that, hey, he might actually be ready for week 1. And Craze, this is certainly a different field than I think what the fantasy community had just a couple of weeks ago. I remember when this news came out, we were seeing these clips from Giants training camp in my Fantasy Pros expert chat. I had the boys saying, hey, time to move up the rankings. And I said, I never moved him. I had him at wide receiver 7 this whole time. He still sits 16 overall in my overall PPR rankings. Where are you currently on Malik Nabers? And is this something we need to bear in mind as fantasy managers, or is this maybe a little bit optimism BS coming out of New Jersey?
No, for me, Jeff is one of the guys that I've always followed on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it at this point. I really do. I appreciate his insight coming that he is a PT. You get a little bit more insight. You see all these guys online. They're saying that they're doctors. They're saying that they know what they're talking about. A lot of them don't. But for me, what I see with Malik Nabers here, I do think it's a very positive thing. I think I'm probably still a little low on him. I think I have him around that wide receiver 18 mark, which
oh wow, okay,
you probably do have to move him up and continue to move him up. And I think he'll get hype going into the season. He's still only 23 years old, so he's super young. Obviously, he did miss most of last year, but from what we saw, he looked good. I think that this is a positive impact for him. I think him coming back helps Jackson Dart. I think it helps the Giants offense as a whole. So for me, I'm really excited with this news. Like I said, there was a chance he was going to start the offseason on the PUP list. He wasn't going to be ready until mid-season. Now we're trending towards week 1, to me, is probably a real possibility. And if not, it's going to be week 2, maybe if he's just not 100% yet. So I think Malik Nabers is a guy that you definitely, if you know, he's not really going to have that ADP because he's already been a little bit lower. So when you're drafting in your, your home leagues and everything, he's going to be a little bit further down that ADP board. And if you can get him as your wide receiver 2, he's got that electric ceiling. I think that he's a great guy that I would be targeting in my leagues right now.
If the ADP continues to rise, like what's your maximum reach on Malik Nabers? I'm getting to the point where, again, I have him 17 overall. I would like to take him closer to that 2-3 turn, but right there, 24, 25 overall, I would be smashing him if I'm on that, 1-2 cliff right there. What about yourself? Is that still too rich for you?
No, I think that's a good place to be at. Like I said, I would love to have him as my wide receiver 2. So if you can get him in that 2-3 turn, maybe he's your second wide receiver, or maybe you're pairing him with 2 really good running backs or something along those lines. So I think that he's a guy that probably, if he starts out slow, I wouldn't be surprised, just kind of work him back into it. But this Giants offense really needs Malik Nabers to be that dominant wide receiver 1. Darnell Mooney's not that guy. Darius Slayton's not that guy. So they really do need him. He has a hole to fill in this offense. So even if he's not 100%, maybe he's 90% to start the season, I think those targets are just going to be enough that I would be comfortable taking him in that 2-3 turn area as well.
And for all the crud that the fantasy community throws on Matt Nagy, and rightfully so, we know one thing about this cat. He loves to target the number 1 receiving option in his offense, whether that was Alshon Jeffrey years ago on the Chicago Bears, or whether it was Rashee Rice down there in Kansas City in 2025. It's usually what happens in Matt Nagy's offense. Is it going to be awesome? Probably not. Are there going to be some doofus play calls? Absolutely. But at the same time, targets are what we're chasing here in fantasy football in production. And that is what Malik Nabers could have right there. So we are both saying this is bear in mind. And Craze, an unfortunate headline coming out of the Bay Area here, where we have, just been shattered, I would say. Like, we were playing roulette right now at the wide receiver position. First, you have Ricky Pearsall, who goes down to the PCL injury. He's going to be out for the entire season after undergoing surgery. We have Mike Evans now on the injury report as well. He missed a day of camp on Monday. And at the same time, Christian Kirk not practicing. And this has led to DeJon Stribling taking a lot of reps with the first team with Brock Purdy, QB1 there. So let's hear what Brock Purdy had to say when talking about his experience with Stribling so far at practice.
Just the way he runs routes, the detail of it. Obviously, we're coaching him up on some stuff and whatnot, like little things. But more than anything, he's come in, he understands the route depths and the details and the alignments in our offense. Like all those things are really tough for rookies. And it's not easy. It's a whole nother language, but he's done a good job of studying, being on top of it. And not even that, just like catching the ball and then like finishing. And like, it's like, all right, this dude has proven to all of us that, he's reliable and we can trust him. But it is day 2 of camp. We got to continue to, find out. But
so Purdy right there, obviously telling us, hey, maybe, we shouldn't jump over our skis about Stribling here because it is only day 2 of camp when that quote came out. But at the same time, it's great to hear that Purdy has trust in him and that he is getting that rep with the first team. So, Craze, where are you at on Stribling? Is everything happening in San Francisco from the signing of Deebo Samuel to the injuries to some of the veterans on this team? Does that lead you to believing in this hype, or is this just a load of malarkey?
I think that it's definitely something to pay attention to, but if I'm not mistaken, Stribling also missed a day of practice this week with the hamstring issue. So it's not just like he'll be immune to these San Francisco 49ers injuries. Everybody can get some on that team. So I do like what they're saying, but when we look at how does this offense work, will there be value for Stribling when it comes to being a wide receiver? One Mike Evans on the field, he's not going to be the wide receiver 1. George Kittle should be back and healthy. Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield. And then you said they just brought in Deebo Samuel. So when we're looking at this offense as a whole, if they're healthy, he's maybe the 5th or 6th option at best coming into the season. Will that have injuries? Absolutely, there will be injuries. Will he be the one who gets injured? We can't predict that at this point. But I do think that I would be cautiously optimistic. I think he's a guy that I wouldn't necessarily be drafting because I want to draft a guy, near the end of my draft where I know what he is going to be week 1 or week 2. I think with Stribling, he's a guy that'll be a good waiver wire pickup when the injuries ahead of him happen. I think he can be involved in this offense, and Kyle Shanahan will find a way to get him the ball consistently if injuries happen. But until that point, I think that he's a guy that I'd probably just still be off of. Rookie hype, it's great. I'm excited to see it, but I don't think it's going to be enough to be fantasy relevant earlier on in the season.
I hate to be a prisoner of the moment because I've been caught in this position before. I remember a couple of seasons ago, I was like, man, I think the Panthers in the moment really reached for Xavier Legette coming out of South Carolina. This big X profile type of wide receiver that sometimes, that raw athleticism and intangibles don't really translate to the next level. And then we kind of started seeing a little bit of training camp buzz, right? And I kind of bought into him at the end of my drafts, and I really regretted that. I hope I'm not falling in the same trap with Stribling, because really, I think most people had this guy as a 3rd, 4th round, type of pick in this draft. The San Francisco 49ers obviously loved him, go out and get him 33 overall. And I'm trying not to fall back into that hype train, but it's hard not to when you hear, the words of Brock Purdy here and you see what he's been doing out there. So I have moved Stribling up to a point that's maybe a little uncomfortable in my rankings. I have him 134 overall right now. Craze at the wide receiver position in particularly. 55 is where I have him. Right ahead of players like Omar Cooper Jr., Romeo Doubs, Jack Besh, Khalil Shakir. That's kind of that same range for me. So he is on my draft board. I'm not going to overdraft him, but 15th, 16th round type of flyer, I'm willing to take that shot. I did it a couple years ago on Ricky Pearsall. He got shot, so that didn't pay out very well, but hoping I can do it with Stribling. You're saying, though, just, hey, I rather, if he goes drafted in my league, you can miss me on it, but if he goes undrafted, he's someone who's maybe going to be on that watch list I add after week 1 or 2.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, just, some people, even after he got drafted, some of the scouts were coming out like he was my wide receiver 1 in this class. It wasn't like
crazy.
Nobody was saying that about Xavier Legette, right? But now we get guys, just as soon as the 49ers made that pick, they were like, this guy, he was my wide receiver 1 in this class. So he definitely has the talent, and I'm excited to see what he can do on the field. I think it'll be the later half of the season, though.
Real quick, Debo, Mike Evans, in or out of on them at current cost. Like, I was kind of above consensus on Mike Evans, but this was another subtle reminder. This guy's super frail. He's a little bit older. That substation is real, I think, because crazy things happen out there in Santa Clara, California to this squad. But Debo Samuel, like, I'm kind of back into if I can get him almost in a similar range, a little bit ahead of where I am taking Stribling. I'm willing to shoot like a 10th, 11th, 12th round pick on Debo. Mike Evans, I'm getting a little more gun shy though.
Yeah, I think for me, I'd be in on Debo. Like I said, with these guys, when we're looking at where are they going to be in ADP come draft, I like to draft as close to the season as possible. Debo hasn't been on a team. So his where he is currently in the ADP, I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but it's probably super low. So even with him being drafted in, the 10th, 11th, 12th round now, by the time that the season comes up, he's going to be lower. I think I'd be in on taking a shot at Debo. He's familiar with the offense already. He's familiar with the quarterback. He's familiar with the entire team. He can get it done on the ground, through the air. I think, like you said, with Mike Evans, how many games is he going to miss this year? If you had to set the over-under how many games he plays, probably be at 10 or 11 would probably be where I'd be like, I don't know if he plays 11 games. I don't know. That's kind of where I'd be at. So I'd be like, okay, Debo, I like. Stribling, I like maybe later on in the season, because we don't even know if Debo will be able to stay healthy.
Yeah, real-time ADP right now coming from Sleeper, courtesy of Fantasy Pros. Wide receiver 57 right now for Debo, so potential value there. And yeah, I think, like, again, if I'm going to take shots on an offense that just happens that everyone gets hurt, just give me the lowest investment I think I can make at this juncture. So I appreciate that. I want to go to this next headline as well, where something's brewing down there in KC. Patrick Mahomes, all of a sudden, boot scoot and boogieing around. He right now, as far as ADP goes, 108 overall, quarterback 14. That is across a various of platforms. So let's look at Patrick Mahomes from this latest Kansas City Chiefs practice on August 1st, where, Craze, this is actually kind of wild to see him like not only get out here, but kind of look like vintage Mahomes running out there, not slowing down, making a couple jab steps. this is really encouraging as well for a player that I thought a lot of people were thinking maybe he would start the season on PUP, but he's out here running with the Wolves. So what are your thoughts on Patrick Mahomes? Is this something we should bear in mind, or is this just a load of BS?
I think that we're seeing him run, I think maybe he's running 3/4 speed, half speed. He's not running full speed. He doesn't have to worry about getting hit. He doesn't have to worry about, okay, what's this guy going to do? Will that be another play that ends my season? I think with Patrick Mahomes, I think we're going to see him sit in the pocket a little bit more this season. I think him and Reed, both super smart, they're going to be like, okay, is it worth the risk of you getting out, you running the ball? He's always been a pretty smart runner, tries to avoid to take those hits, and I think he's going to be even more conservative, especially early in the season, just until he can get fully confident and get back at it. So for me, Patrick Mahomes, with the questions at, who's going to step up on this team now that Travis Kelce is another year older, plus the addition of Kenneth Walker in the backfield. Mahomes, for me, I like to see him running around, but it's not like we see, Malik Nabers where he's running around, he's doing all these cuts, and he's showing that he's fully back to go. Patrick Mahomes, he's scrambling a little bit when he doesn't have to worry about getting hit and he doesn't have to run full speed. So I'm cautioning people, don't expect Patrick Mahomes to go out there and get you 500-600 yards on the ground this season. I think he'd be closer to around that 250-yard mark, and that's just not going to be kind of what he's had in the past.
So your BS meter is definitely up on this one, it sounds like. Are you willing to take him in drafts though right now at that quarterback 14 price? Because a lot of my recent drafts, Craze, I've been sitting in the pocket just waiting for these quarterbacks to come off the board. I've been grabbing Mahomes late and pairing it with someone like Jared Goff, who's going out there and just has an exceptional schedule starting out here. Saints, Bills, Jets, Panthers, Cardinals. Really nothing scary about that start for Jared Goff and the Lions. So that's kind of my approach, is like, hey, can I throw Jared Goff out there the first couple weeks? Can I grab a Malik Willis, someone who I know has some extraordinary upside with the rushing ability, and then have Patrick Mahomes if he does get back into form? Is that something you'd be willing to do, or is he just kind of on your do not draft list currently?
Yeah, I'd be good to take him. Like you said, at the quarterback 14, he's your quarterback 2, or maybe you just punted the position. He is your quarterback 1, but you're going to draft another guy. If you pair him with Jared Goff, like you said, good schedule to start, I think it's a great place to be in, because then you're not pressured to put Patrick Mahomes into your lineup. Obviously, if you're playing in a league with like 4 bench spots or something, you probably don't want to be harboring 2 quarterbacks on your roster. But if you have the room, I think that he's a good, like I said, you're going to be able to play the matchups with him. I think that there's going to be great matchups for him where the Kansas City Chiefs team is going to be putting up 35 points. Those are going to be good games for him, but just going to have to watch for those games against Denver where maybe it's a 10-13 game like we've seen in the past, and then all of a sudden, without any sort of rushing floor, Patrick Mahomes puts up maybe 5 or 6 points. But if you have another quarterback, you compare that. I think that's built into his current ADP. So I would definitely be interested in that if that's a strategy you want to go with.
Deep benches make fantasy football fun, I think. Unless you're in one of these crazy like 16, 20 team leagues, then I think it's a short bench is okay. But I think deep benches always make it a little more competitive on the waiver wire, a little bit more strategy induced as well, if that's your cup of tea. And I don't know about you guys, but every year someone says they're in the most competitive fantasy football league around, and then half the league stops setting lineups by week 6. That's why I love what we're doing over at draftnightout.com with the newly released Draft Night Out Online. Every league is 12 teams on Sleeper. Every league winner advances to a season-ending playoff challenge, and there are legitimate prizes on the line. I'm talking about championship belts to a PlayStation 5, Madden 27, and a Trophy Smack ring. Plus, Draft Night Out Online isn't just about winning a championship, and we love to do that. It's also about giving back. Yes, we're giving a portion of every draft entry directly donated to Mission 22 to support veterans and their families. We appreciate their service to this country. And it's the same feel-good vibe if you've been to our in-person Draft Night Out event, but it's happening online at your convenience. So if you think you've got what it takes, head to draftnightout.com to reserve your spot today. And very much looking forward to seeing everyone there in Draft Night Out Online. Craze, I know you got a lot of leagues happening, but if there was ever a good one to join, I think it's draftnightoutonline.com, my friend.
Absolutely. And my favorite thing when you're looking at that scoring is there's no kickers in fantasy football, and that's what I like to see. I hate when you go up against this kicker that's just pulled up off the waivers, and they score 25 points this week.
Oh.
Miss me with that kickers do not belong in fantasy football.
I love it. That is a take that, like in my traditional home league redraft, I do enjoy the kicker element to a point, but I've been screwed over it time and time again. Championships have been decided by kickers. That I agree. I think we're past that point in our fantasy fandom. Let's go ahead though. We have a new headline out of Denver where Sean Payton making things as fantasy managers very, very easy. Once again, just like a couple years ago when he said draft Michael Thomas, he's telling us to draft maybe his newest addition here in Denver. Let's take a listen to hear what Sean Payton had to say, courtesy of NFL Network right now and the ESPN Fantasy Show.
That's been fantastic. And there was so much work that went into that trade and with Miami, but also with his background and who he's played for. And the thing that you see in which is a big strength of his is how much he loves football. You know, he's a elite competitor, and those type of personalities I think are infectious, and he's got that. It kind of rubs off on everyone else. That's been really good.
Okay, so
that's going to affect your fantasy show.
Oh, okay. Noted.
It's always
Noted.
hard. It's always hard with receivers.
Do you watch?
But oh my gosh, it's like the last thing before I go to bed. But receivers,
he's in the lab. He's in the lab.
Really harder to predict than the tight end or the running back because the ball gets sprayed around. But it's interesting to see. He's one of those guys that can play in the slot. He can play outside, and there's two ways guys can separate, with great speed or they can stop fast. And he happens to be a player that has great speed and he can stop fast. And that he gets open a lot with those.
So there you have it, Craze. Sean Payton saying Jaylen Waddle will affect NFL Network's fantasy show. Where are you at on Waddle? Because he's a player. I don't think we've talked a ton about this offseason between myself, and Steve and everyone here at FSAN. But I've slowly started moving him up the rankings. I think maybe, every year or two, we get this wide receiver that kind of moves under the radar to a new team, whether that was, 5 or so years ago with Stephon Diggs moving out to Buffalo, whether that was the last couple of years, like George Pickens a year ago going to Dallas, where people overlook. Is this that spot with Jaylen Waddle where he's going to go out and potentially fulfill the wide receiver one promise he had as a rookie and really hasn't got back to that ceiling since? Where are you at on Waddle, and is this something to bear in mind, or is this BS straight from the mouth of Sean Payton?
Well, I think we've had our fair share of BS from Sean Payton in the past. He's always been a guy to come out and just say all kinds of things. I love Jaylen Waddle, even going back to Alabama when he started in Miami. He was great. And I think that he can be a really good NFL wide receiver for the Denver Broncos. My concern when it comes to what can he do for your fantasy team this year is Courtland Sutton is the red zone threat. He has been that guy ever since he's been in the league. And even when you look at last year, Courtland Sutton was just getting it done in the red zone. Him and Bo Nix seem to be on the same page. Jaylen Waddle, to me, he's more of a guy who's going to see more targets than Courtland Sutton when I have them statted out. You got more targets, more yards for Waddle, and then the touchdowns just found themselves in Sutton's basket, honestly, when we look back. And so for me, I think that Waddle can be a guy who can get you 10 to 15 PPR points a game because I think he's going to be kind of that safety guy. They tried to get Evan Ingram super involved in Denver, and it just kind of hasn't worked because Evan Ingram isn't the guy that he used to be when he was with Jacksonville, where he could just be that safety blanket. He could get, 8 to 10 targets a game. I think that can be Jaylen Waddle. That's what he did in his rookie year when he had 140 targets and 104 receptions. So I think he's going to be really good. I think I have him in between a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, a guy you can put in your flex every week. So I'm definitely in on Jaylen Waddle. I think people forget how good he is because he's been on some bad Miami teams in the past. Jaylen Waddle is a great NFL wide receiver.
Right now, we're seeing his ADP at 51 overall consensusly, wide receiver 22. Does that sound about right? Would you be willing to get much more aggressive than that? Because I honestly think if I'm sitting on that 3-4 turn and I went RB from the 12 spot, I'm looking at guys like him, and I think I'm looking at guys like Emeka Ibuka. Those are almost two of my favorite targets right there in that frame. I know Zay Flowers is kind of in that range. He just got paid. T. Higgins, Garrett Wilson. I'm starting to move him above some of those players. Where are you at as far as like, are you clicking that button at that 3-4 turn? Is that too rich for you? And where do you rank him compared to these other more prominent wide receivers over the past few seasons?
Yeah, I think that he can be in that range. Like I said, he's wide receiver 22. I think I can't remember exactly what happened, but it's somewhere between wide receiver 22 and wide receiver 28. So he's definitely in that range for me. When we're looking at, guys like Emeka Ibuka, who is going to be the wide receiver 1 for his team, and that should be a productive spot for Baker Mayfield going into a contract year. So I think I like Ibuka better. And then we get into the Garrett Wilsons, where he's going to be the wide receiver 1 on his team, but it's the Jets. And will that be a similar situation where Jaylen Waddle, I think, when we look end of season, is going to be the wide receiver 1, as I said, in targets and in yards for this team. So I think I would lean on Waddle over a guy like Wilson, because even as the second option in the red zone for the Broncos is still better than being the number 1 option in that Jets offense. So I do like him over that. Zay Flowers, never really been a touchdown guy, but he finished as the wide receiver 7 last year in half point. So I think I'd probably lean Zay Flowers just because I think it's a little bit more consistent. Okay. He's going to be that target. Isaiah Likely is now gone from there as well. But I do like Waddle in and around that range for sure.
Okay. Yeah, he is certainly moving up the rankings for me, and excited to see where he ends up ultimately. But definitely, I think will be one of these training camp risers, whether that's BS or not from our friend Sean Payton, we shall see. But Craze, appreciate everything you brought to the program tonight, man. We have a ton more episodes coming out your way very quickly. And if you rode along with us this long, please do us a quick favor. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed this type of content. Then don't forget, subscribe right here to the FSAN Fantasy Football Advice channel and the HQ channel so you don't miss any of our coverage across football, basketball, baseball, racing, and golf. Also, be sure to check out FSAN.com for some dope written content. For my buddy Craze, I'm Seth Wilcock. Thank you so much for watching, and keep it in between. Until next time, y'all.